It's altogether very collective, like in every sense of the word. I think we're working with no director, but everybody can share their ideas, and then we just find a way to try out these ideas one after each other. And so someone will step outside and watch while the others perform, and then we take turns. Someone else steps out, and so we always want to get both perspectives, like from the outside and from the inside. And so this happened with that rehearsals as well, and we found a way to set up all these cameras, and even the video designer stepped in front of the camera, and we tried to get those body parts together, and yeah, and that's how we did it.
How long does it take normally for work? Because like if we're working collectively, and I assume there will be like lots of discussion and then a more like democratic process. And how long for rehearsals normally?
It's usually about 12 weeks, but we split them. We have a phase quite early on, which we call conceptual phase, where we test the overall idea that we came up with often some time ago, because we need to write an application to apply for funding or something like that. And then, so in this first phase, it's the first practical test of that original idea, and we try to make a sketch of it and find out if it's roughly working or if something's changed. Sometimes, you know, you move on artistically or as a person, and you kind of feel not so much more connected to the idea, and then maybe another ingredient needs to come into the soup. And yeah, after that first phase, there's a longer gap, and then we have like a rehearsal development phase, and the last phase, sometimes there's again a gap, and then there's the last phase, which is the run-up towards the premiere.
Oh, so like it lasts for 12 weeks, but like actually...
Yes, we try to spread it. It's often spread over the period of a year.
Okay. So the starting point of this study show is shame. You start with some concerns, for example, some keywords. How did you always start? Start with an idea, start with a play, an essay.
Yeah, because Alki told us yesterday, you were given the play. Because you're a kind of a commission or working with a chemistry.
It was a suggestion by the director, but we could have said we are not interested, and suggested something else or refused it. But we were intrigued by the overall topic of sex and sexual education, which is called in German Aufklärung, and it's this thing of this idea that through words you can make someone understand.
Which also means enlightenment. It's the same.
It's the same word.
Same word for sexual education and
sexual
enlightenment.
Enlightenment and enlightenment from Kant. It's the same word.
And, I wish it.
Exactly.
Not enlightened.
And so we were intrigued by this topic, or this kind of field of tension, so to say. And we had this formal idea as a leftover. Often we have like a leftover idea of a project we've been working on, where you discover something and then there is no space for it, or you have to kill your darlings, but you still have this one thing. And it was something that we developed for the Rite of Spring, Frühlingsopfer, which we did together with our mothers, the composition from Stravinsky. And there it's also a visual video setup, where we also collaborated with the same video artist, Benjamin Krieg, and we developed this thing of this overlaying and stepping into images together. And that we were intrigued by, and we wanted to develop further, because it's kind of develops towards that, and now we wanted to take it as a starting point.
And I think it was only when we had that idea that we would work with a strong video setup, which will with superimposed images and a collage technique. Only then we thought we could or we should work with that strong dramatic text. Because when we work with a play, then we always need another strong element, because we are no actors, directors, and so we would not want to just do a play, or like we need another approach.
We never usually do plays. We never start from dramatic text. Usually, it's only been one other exception before, and we often in the past we did often develop games. So we used to say we don't do plays, we do games, because that creates a real frame of a game that where you follow rules and you have to react in the here and now to play that game, so to say. And that was more our approach to dramatic situations on stage.
Because I found yesterday what is so like intrigued to me is you have the text, and then you have also the layers, which is very like sheshepop style, using your story and then using your body and like the layerings and how you can like you're juxtaposing the text with the image that I saw on, like I saw with the video, but also with your personal stories and this. It is very different from other work, right? Because very often it's more the game that you talk about, have a rule, and about your own autobiographical materials. But this time you need a text, and but you have text, and then how this layering and editing like process? Could you please share a bit about that?
I think in earlier work we focused more on the individual and how they need to combine different elements of their personality to create a persona on stage, and sometimes you see them struggling within these games to be someone on stage and to make the audience like project onto them. And but in the last shows, more and more we got more interested in the ways either to speak as a collective together, to share a perspective, and this production is another way to get away from the idea of the individual, in the sense that we try to lend each other a voice or a body part, and to put together like a monster or a bastard out of several aspects of several like performers or personalities, to really share, especially in the moment of shame, to share, like to be solidary. You can say that?
Solidarity?
Yeah, to show some solidarity in that moment where someone exposes themselves, to be together in that moment. So that was different in that production.
Yeah, I think it's quite an artistic frame, or a very formal game, so to say, this overall setup, this video setup, because it's very utopian. It's very, theatrical in some sense. It's not anything we can do in real life, so it's very fantastical. It's magical somehow, and as a performer, it's very enjoyable to do. It's so much fun to, have these opportunity and means of expression that you don't have normally on stage, and so it feels a bit like playing a game, even though it's very composed and it's not spontaneous or not so spontaneous on the visual side. Like we have very fixed positions, and we know we go from position A to position B, and first I'm just the upper body, and then I'm going to go over there, and then I'm just limited to perform the legs, and then I'm going over there and I'm the speaking head. And that's fixed. But then there's other parts in the performance where we play these games with words, so to say, where it's, for example, the scene of was ist erlaubt? What's allowed? What's allowed? And then there are certain rules that we have to follow as the people answering. The teenagers always mainly repeating this question or trying to come up with new questions out of the things we try to enlighten her with, and that's open, you know, that's improvised, and we can bring in new material every day, and we don't know when she is going to insist or when she is letting it pass, and so.
And you sometimes you never know when you get the microphone, and then you have to follow and answer. And,
And how would you describe sheshepop? I would like to follow the question I asked just now, because you use like honestly, it's the first time I saw your work, and I read I just read about the interview, and then like, for example, some other materials on you, and you use lots of autobiographical materials, and you at the beginning you set up as a female group, but at the end like it's much more open now, and you have a very strong vision, or especially at that time in like German theater, you particularly set up a group like that, and like what you said, you don't really interested in doing text. I mean, like classical text, and like the usual stage theater. So far, I know about like German theater, and why?
Well, sheshepop was founded in the 90s in Gießen, where most of us studied, in the Institute of Angewandte Theaterwissenschaften, which is not how you say a course of study in university which is designed to follow the Stadttheater route, but it's an alternative, and it's more, I think the understanding of the founder is that it's an avant-garde school, and it's very small number of students, and Gießen is very not a nice place to be, so the people coming there, they're very dedicated, and you can't really do much there. So the students do spend time with each other, and there is this stage which is open for 24 hours, and every student can book in, and so people do work a lot and with each other, making own projects, and on the other hand, everyone, whenever there's a performance, everyone comes to watch, and everyone talks about it and analyzes it and criticizes it very hard, and that's mostly that's our background, so to say. So in Gießen, it was not such a big thing to not do the classical way of psychological acting on stage, but nevertheless, at the time when I studied, it was quite common to have, I don't know, more modern dramatic text like from Heiner Müller or other things. And the new thing was that some of the founding members of sheshepop started actually from saying, we want to talk about ourselves, we want to tell our own biography, our own story. And we were only at the beginning of the 20s, so it was quite a weird thing to say, we tell you our biography, so to say, because it kind of felt a bit like, what have you got to say? You're not a special person. You led an ordinary life, but they did it as a collective. I wasn't part of that performance. I watched it, and it was 4 of the members who are still in sheshepop today, and they did it as a collective text, so to say, or a collective narration of their first 20 years of life. And so they looked for the common ground and the stuff they shared, and it became a story about growing up in the 80s, and from personal material. They used records, they used books that they quoted, but they also told a lot of personal stories. And that was very unusual at the time. Both that they worked on it collectively, as only women's collective, and that they dared to put this personal material on stage and to take it as important as, I don't know, a historic event or something like that. And these days, I think the cultural landscape in Germany has changed quite a bit, and there's now more courses where the young students today think that it's kind of normal that you work collectively and that you tell your own personal stories. It's changed, but at that time it was unconventional, new thing to do. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you think you have changed or you will change then? Because as you say, the context nowadays has changed a little bit.
I think, I don't know, I mean, we have changed a lot in like, for example, this work you've just watched, the 50 Grades of Shame. It's very visual and it's using this quite elaborate video setup, which is quite unusual. It's a new thing for us, or quite recent, and then the next work, the work we are working on right now, which will premiere in June, doesn't use any images, so we are constantly shifting and trying new things, but some things, some ingredients or some principles stay the same, and it's probably more the perspective from the outside world.
I think in the earlier work we felt the need to challenge the situation of the audience and the stage, and we always wanted to mess with it, like mix it up somehow, and transform the whole place, the whole theater place in a dance hall, or into some other situation, or and to not say that we do theater, but to suggest that it could be a sports game also, and then we try to invent a sports game with the spectators being fans, and so they always used to have a certain part in this, more than a spectator.
Yeah, because I think we were quite. It was very important to us to somehow prove that it was an immediate event, or like that the game wasn't scripted, but that it was for real. So we're looking for strategies to make that apparent to the audience.
But these days we are not so afraid anymore, or not afraid, but we are not so much against this very clear situation that this is the audience, a collective, and we are here, and we still try to work with that. Like we still try to define the situation again or anew, but in the later work, it's not. We don't always come up to the audience and want something of them or from them.
It was
sometimes
used to work very interactive.
Sometimes we really would try and make them participate.
Yeah.
And in our next show, the audience will again have a big part, but it's a different thing now. It's I don't know.
But I think it's part of this, you're asking about how we founded ourselves. It's part of our origin, because we used to be a women's group, that one of the early experience was that the way we were perceived and people looked at us was very different from our male colleagues, for example. So it was a very important empowering gesture for us to turn on the light in the auditorium and say, okay, you look at us in this certain way, okay, now we look back. And you're part of the picture too. So if you want to look at us, you have to be in the picture, and everyone witnesses how you're looking at us. And so we came up with lots of concepts that were making that, put that into the center of the performative situation. And we, in the early years, we had to do that, and it was quite an aggressive relationship we had with the audience at that time. And through that, we kind of changed, I think, the relation, and maybe also the way people look at us. And now we can allow them to sit in the dark and watch us.
Okay, that's a good story.
But and then do you like, because lots of your work are so relevant because it's like the work we saw yesterday, and it was sex education, and you use your own stories and so relevant now.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that it is a very important part in when you create your work, that it has to have some kind of being contemporary and relevant to the audience that was sitting in the theater, that and there has to be some kind of to the reality that we're living in. Yeah, that relation, would that be important to you when you create?
I think it has something to do with our method, to take ourselves as an example and to use our own material as a method more. It's not that we want to, that it's about us, about our stories, but it's more like that we use the things we know and the things we experience or our questions to create something, to create a situation on stage that opens up our mind, or I don't know. So and that's why it needs to be relevant for us, because we put ourselves as the examples on stage, and so of course we try to look for a question that we find relevant, and that's hard work sometimes. Like to convince each other that this is a good topic, and sometimes we feel if we're getting afraid, then it's maybe a good one. Like if some people say, "Oh, I don't want to do it. It's too no. Let's not do that."
You know,
Then
doing Stravinsky with our mothers or something, or doing a piece with our own mothers, and then people saying, "Oh, I'm really scared to do that.
Let's
I
not
feel
do it."
really uncomfortable." Then we feel like, okay, that's probably what we should do. But I mean, there is people that, you know, who don't like our work. They are accusing us of that we're irrelevant. You know, we're not dealing with the big global topics, problems, or not in the depths that, I don't know, the ancient Greek dramas can express it, or whatever. And for us, it's more this feeling of like, yeah, but this is what we can talk about. This is what I'm an expert for. You know, I can only speak on behalf of this, because as the performer, I'm also the author, and I'm the director, and I'm on stage. So I can only embody what I can understand and what I can speak for myself, and I carry the responsibility for my actions on stage, because it comes in the person of the performer in a unit, and there's no division, and I can't say, I'm the actress, but you know, the playwright, unfortunately, it's not so talented, or the playwright is great, but the director did a bad job or something. It's all coming down to the people on stage, so to say.
But of course, it's always more than what one individual can come up with, because it's several perspectives, and we believe that the fact that there are more than one perspective, that there are many perspectives on that question or within a situation, can create something more complex and more relevant even.
We are often more performers in a production than you see on stage at a time. And so our personal material comes into into a piece or into a performance, and it's shared like in a pool, you know, and it's not my personal material anymore. It belongs to all the people that are performing that part as well. And so like it's
we can all be replaced.
It's
it's not about.
It's
right
personal, but it's detached, you know. It's like, for example, in this game, what is allowed, and if someone has a good story or a good thing to say, but they're not performing that night, I could say, or they haven't said it yet, and I feel, oh, this would be good now, I can tell that story.
So we're not very strict with that.
Very collective.
It's collective authorship, so to say.
Yeah. And will you consider sheshepop, the work you're doing, is kind of a documentary theater if we have a broader sense? Because you, like what I understand is like documentary theater also trying to give different perspective for the audience, like different kind of narratives, and then also use lots of materials that are personal or documents, and trying to be relevant to the world we are living in as well, the piece. Do you consider that? Or?
I think there's, we have lots in common with documentary theater, but would not maybe name us that. Documentary theater deals with, quite often deals with perspectives on history or on social issues that are not mainstream, but you can have documents that nobody knows or have got forgotten or something like that, and this is something that we are also interested in, like to represent or to give voice a perspective that is not the main opinion or so. And so this is one thing, and the other thing is that documentary theater quite often tells many stories and not one big story. And this is also what we do. We have we tell stories, but not one. Yeah, and but I think we have a different focus because although this also can happen in documentary theater, our focus is to be our own example, and it's not so much about the truth of that. It's not so with documentary theater. I think it's quite often the question: what is true? Or can we find out about the truth? Or is that is it fake or is it true? Something like that. While with us, it's more like we want to create a space where things are possible. It's more like an utopian space. We try to set up rules for communication that is not every day, for example.
And it can't happen outside of the artificial frame of theater.
So the artificial frame is very crucial. We need the theater frame for what we do, and it's not so much about authenticity of a document. That's often people think that we're all about authenticity, but it's not so much the case. We just use our material, but we want to put it in a situation that is not authentic, but is more utopian or open.
That's very nice, how you put it. And
I think my problem with the label documentary theater is often that the people who are using it in Germany, they deny the artfulness in the making or in the creation, and they don't see that it's also very crafted, because they think it's more like a found object, like a objet trouvé, like Duchamp taking that Uranus thing and putting it into a museum, changing the perspective on the thing. But that's not what we do. And I don't know, there was this Literature Nobel Prize winner, Svetlana Alexeyevich. I don't know if you heard of her, from the Ukraine, I think she is. And she did a lot of interviewing people, and that's how she created her books, from these interview materials. So it's very, and some people said, why did she win the Nobel Prize for Literature? It's just, you know, journalistic work. And that's, I feel, how some people look at us, as if we do kind of journalistic montage or something. And that's, for me, totally denying the artistic, I don't know how to, I'm lacking words there, but the, you know, the framing or the montaging or the changing and what you add to it or what you reduce.
Conceptual frame.
The conceptual frame that's around it. And so I think we understand what we do more like conceptual artists, that the framing is very important to us.
就差唔多，你仲有冇？我哋嘅標題話都差唔多啦。夠啦，係咪？好啦。
Just one last question happened to my mind. So there must be sometimes when you, because there are so many voices and so many opinions, but there must be sometimes when you have conflicts, when you have different views. So how do you solve that? Or, yeah, of course now you have been working for 20 years, I know you know each other well, but in the early stage, how do you come to
We still have
a
conflicts.
decision?
Oh, there are still conflicts.
I think for the most helpful thing I find is that it's when there's conflicting ideas or is to not avoid power struggle and go into trying something practically. Like, okay, you've got this idea, I don't think it will work, I have a different idea. Let's first try your idea, then let's try my idea. And then we look at it, and then often it becomes obvious for everyone in the room, oh, actually it is working. Or the beginning is working, but if you combine it with the middle of my section or something, you know, something else develops and we keep moving. And it's rather than talking for an hour like why I think your idea is not so good as mine or whatever. And that's the thing that I find most helpful, just trying to stay practical.
Over the years, we learned that we have different strengths, of course. For example, I'm very critical and doubtful, and I'm very negative. And but sometimes, and then together we realized that's only a part you play. Someone else could play that part. Like, you can do it, but someone else could do it as well. So, and that gives me the freedom to, oh, let's not play that part. Let's not be like that, because somebody else did it before. So maybe I can relax and not be so doubtful this time also. But so this is one strategy that we learned. And but for example, these days sometimes I struggle.
Sorry to say, but also we learned that these different roles are also important within the collective. Like, maybe in the early years I was like, oh, why is he always doubting? That's just stopping us. And now I understood, oh, actually it's also a creative force, and it's good, you know, it can bring us further to question everything, throw it away, start from new. It's sometimes very productive. And so it's also about this trust or appreciation that built over the years, of course.
I think you get to know, you still have to learn how a collective works. Even though it's been going on for 20 years or so, you still have to learn some lessons. For example, when you feel you don't get enough recognition for your work because the collective eats it all up, but what about you like your own share? It's too small or so, you need more recognition. And then you just learn how the collective works, that everybody needs to come up with the idea, like have the feeling that it's their idea, and I take on board ideas from other people and make it mine, and so it takes some time, but everybody needs that recognition. It's not only you, so you have to be generous, and you have to practice.